We are back from recess. It is 1:32 p.m. This session is set to go until 4:15 p.m. We are back with the 2024 through 2025 budget presentations. This is an informational session, and we are picking up with human resources. I'll pass it to Nicole. Do you need to do?
Yes. Okay, so we're here today to speak with departments and offices about their budget requests. First will be Human Resources Maria Ponte to speak about her policy level human resource request. And we'll be going through a series of department and offices requests today.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners, Budget Team. My name is Maria Ponte. I am the HR Director, and I am here today to talk about the HR department, the services we provide. We'll review our funds and financial plans. We'll go over HR challenges and opportunities. And while I will be presenting policy level requests that I worked on over the last several months, I recognize the budget situation and the magnitude of the decisions that you have to make. And then I'll have a high level overview of what funding cuts may mean for HR, including what the level of service impacts are and what work we can stop doing. All right. So first of all, I'll just talk about our various divisions, and I work closely with all of you, so I know that you understand that the work that we do, but I'll go ahead and just give that high level overview. We have HR partnered with elected offices and departments to implement board policies, programs, services that contribute to inclusive, healthy, safe, and productive work environment for all of our employees. We have the compensation and benefits team. They do all the new employee, putting them into our payroll system, providing them with benefits. Those benefits include medical, dental, long-term disability. We also have a employee assistance program, a vacation, alternative, floating holidays, sick leave. So we really have a great compensation plan. In terms of our HR general programmatic areas, that's what we call the Employee and Labor Relations team, which consists of performance management, coaching, the disciplinary process, providing policy interpretation, medical accommodations, and protected leave administration and employee training. The labor part of it is bargaining 10 collective bargaining agreements, interpreting contract language, processing grievances, responding to demands to bargain. We also do all the recruitment, requisitions, and job postings. And we provide training that includes things like harassment prevention, safe driving, cybersecurity. We also provide admin support such as our reception, and we organize employee recognition on behalf of the Commissioner's Office. You know a lot about risk management because you work with Tammy and her team a lot. They administer the county's insurance programs. They administer the countywide workers' comp program, and they also provide claims management for defense and settlement of tort claims. And then we also help you support several boards and commissions. That includes the Board of Equalization, the Civil Service Commission, the Citizens Commission on Salaries for Elected Officials, and LEF, which is the Law Enforcement Officers and Firefighters Disability Board. So with that, I will move on to the funds that we manage. In this slide, you'll see our restricted funds, risk insurance, unemployment, benefits administration, and the leave buyout. And you'll see the 2024 estimated, and then the 2025 estimated funds. You'll see that we're keeping them within the goals that we have. So $4 million for the risk insurance, for unemployment, we like to stay between 1.5 million and 2 million. We're also with benefits administration, we are in line with between 200,000, 250,000. The leave buyout is our most recent fund that we've started managing, and the goal there was to leave it as is, but let it start to increase. Do you have any questions, specific questions on these funds?
Questions?
You know, I don't know if my questions are all that specific on this whole thing. But I do have a concern, and it's kind of a joint question for you and Robin, really. And it kind of goes back to where we're at today, the reality of where we're at today. I guess my question is, do we have money or not, extra money or not? And if yes, how much? And if not, what can you, as the manager of HR, cut out of your current budget so that we could reprioritize for these more important needs? So, does that kind of make sense? I mean, I'm trying to grapple with this. We're telling our constituents and our employees that we're gonna make X number of reductions, and it's kind of like 80 reductions or something, FTEs. I don't know that, somewhere in that category. So it's a big thing to some of these folks. Others maybe that have been here a long period of time or what, no. But I think we're obligated to tell them where we're going with this. If there is no money, I think we gotta say there's no money. And if there is no money, then if these things become a higher priority, what can you do within your operation to try to fund these more important? Because everything you're doing is important. I can't think of one thing that you're doing that is not very important. It's very important to your operation, but also to the benefit of the community. If we don't have insurance, for an example, boy, that's a big gamble. And undoubtedly, we would lose. I don't know if there's an insurance policeman out there that says you gotta have insurance. There is if you're a driver of a car, but, so that's kinda, I know that kinda puts you on the spot, but.
I'm sorry, didn't Robin say or this morning, and then Maria reiterate that she's gonna go through that outline, and the third piece of that's gonna be
Yeah, and
answering your question? So
and
why are
I'll-
we
and I'll
talking
get
about that
there.
now? She's
I'm
gonna
just
talk about
trying
that
to
in about
get, I'm trying
10
to get to
minutes.
the point. I'm trying to get to the point.
I wanna know, I
Soon
frankly
as I
wanna
can.
know what it is that we're not gonna be able to fund that's a need of the department. So to me, it is the point, what the needs are, because it's setting the scope of what the impact of decisions we're making and what, our future projections are. So to me, it's right on point.
Well, it is to me as well. I agree with you, Commissioner, but we've been told there is no money. So I wanna know, is there money or is there not money? And I think the public has every right to know as we debate what we're gonna do, is there money or not? And if not, why don't we reprioritize within each one of the agencies that are coming before us and just tell them straight out, we don't have any money? And what would you do to help us find money? I mean, I don't know if you got a lottery ticket, I'll take that off your hands if it's a winner, but if not, I need to know without a bunch of rigmarole, straight out, what we've got and what we don't have. And so we have a difference in opinion, sir, but I guess that's what makes this country great.
I don't think we have a difference of opinion. We're exactly structuring, Robin explained that we're structuring each of these presentations in a different way than we have in the past. That's gonna directly address the question that you have and that I have too. So I think we're on the exact same page.
So I think, and this also, it goes back to, like, I completely get it, right? It's like, because it was my thing too in the past of why listen to all the policy decisions, right, when we can't even fund them. But per state law, we have to give everyone an equal opportunity to come forth with their request, and even if there is no money, to kind of just lay it out. And I think that's what Maria is doing right now, I think, and that's why, she said, I know that there is no there is no funding. I mean, the reality, I think, is there that, and everyone knows it, there's just no money. So
I
I
do-
think she's just going through the process of laying out her requests, just per the state law, and then after that, she's gonna possibly go back to your piece of the, question of like, okay, what is it, that you're planning on? What is your proposal here of the 8% is what we asked all offices and departments to come forward with and put forth their proposal and go from there. So,
Okay. I trust Maria to get it right,
Alright.
but we're gonna listen to a lot of material here. And in the end, we still don't have any money.
Yeah.
If we've got some money, I'm all ears, but if we have no money, why do we go through this smoke and mirrors motion of we may find it? Have you got a lottery ticket in your pocket, Robin? I wanna know what's
A
going
lottery
on.
ticket, what I would suggest to you, it's not that we have no money, it's that we have a limited amount of money. And as commissioners, you need to know that we're putting the money that we have to the most important things. And if you don't hear from the offices and departments of what they need and what they give up under these budget cuts, then you wouldn't have all the information to make these very critical decisions.
Okay,
I mean, you could flip the order, I guess, and have each department
Could.
talk about the cut and then, but if I had money, these are the things I'd fund. I don't know if that gets to Commissioner
do
Edwards'
you want to,
concern.
do you wanna get to that first,
no,
switch the
I mean, I'm
order?
I'm frustrated with the whole thing, to be honest
There's a
with you.
process.
And I trust Maria to make those decisions that, I don't know about running her particular shop. She knows about running her shop, and that's why I don't know if I wanna flip the order. I just wanna be realistic up front. Okay, we've got 2% of what our budget is that maybe we could squeeze somewhere else. Something besides, we're telling everybody we have no money, but yet that's not really true. We have some money, very
Limited amount.
limited amount of money. Let's be straight up with everybody, including our employees. Our employees are very agitated right now that we've got 30-some million in an ending fund balance, and they don't understand where it all needs to go and how it needs to balance out. So I'm getting a lot of flack from employees, and I don't blame them for getting after me about answers. And I can't give an answer if I don't hear from you, you're the money person, and if you don't say, well, we've got 1%, we might be able to massage 1%. Something besides we got no money, we're gonna lay you off, but yeah, we got a little over here, but we don't know how much and how we're gonna prioritize.
So, remember
I've
the
shared the
exercise.
forecasts. I've shared the forecasts, and each office and department's gonna show you their other restricted funds that we might be able to consider based on what they need. But again, this is a process, and it's all information that I think is important for you to have,
And the gloomy news
It's-
is about the general fund. But
right?
there's other funds where we have new legislative allocation of more foundational public health money or whatever. So I
Right.
mean, we have to, and some of these departments cross over. They've got some expenditures that are general fund funded and other ones that are not. So we have to hear all this stuff in order to make all the decisions we have to make. It's not all general fund decisions.
That's right.
I had good discussions with Robin about the split.
Yes,
Oh,
yes, you
this whole
did.
thing. Okay. Sorry about that
No,
delay, Madam
no,
Chair.
it's, I think, that's why we went through the exercise, and that's why I asked for that specific short list of items when we were going through the different, we were discussing revenue and cuts and all of that, and how much we would have to do. And it was that short list, right, that was like, what are we, like, what is it that we need to do? And based on kind of that short list is kind of how we landed on that 8%. So just, we can switch up the order, right? And maybe start
Sure.
with the cuts first, and then we can go through kind of, the needs after, if that's,
we could, offices and departments come very prepared. So if we're gonna ask them to switch it up, let us know so we can let folks know.
Yeah, I think is that request okay? Like, I'm looking towards the
well,
board for direction.
My concern is that we still have been told there's no money. So if there's no money, then how do we even, I would say we'd send staff back and say, okay, there's no money. Now, if you wanna do something different than you're doing with your existing money that's 8% less than it was last year, then figure that out and come back with a proposal, because I'm going by it's the gospel, we got no money. We got 8% less money, so why don't we try to prioritize right out of the gate about what you've got, what you can cut back, you can get along without this FTE or doing this particular project. I'm just trying to cut it down, get through the bureaucracy and get to the meat and potatoes, so to speak. That's all, and how we do that, I don't care, but I wanna get to it. I wanna hear what's going on. I kind of have heard this story many, many times. I've been here longer than the rest of you. I guess maybe that's why I'm more frustrated than the rest of you, so, okay.
Okay,
So-
well, I'll just jump straight to what the 8% cut means to HR is $185,000 cut in our general fund, which the department can absorb through vacancy saving. I have a anticipated vacancy that I wouldn't fill. That covers the majority of it, but also need to look at where else I can cut funds, be it reducing work hours, so staff can work a fewer hours. I'd hate to have to lay off more than one full equivalency because of the workload doesn't get any easier, it doesn't ever go away. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, the Washington State paid sick leave came into effect, and that was added workload. We now have to process that work. Things like family and medical leave, we have to process those requests. Medical accommodation per the American with Disabilities Act, we have to make those accommodations. Labor relations, we have to bargain collectively with our 10 collective bargaining units. So what I'm having to look at is what work do we stop doing? Is it less training? Is it less focus on classification and compensation, right? That's been a huge workload. And so we've started those discussions, and so today I don't have a resolute that, here's what I'm putting forward, but I am looking at the gamut of what we can continue to do and not do.
Where's your financial plan for general fund?
General fund. So here's our general fund, and you'll see that the bulk of our positions are in the general fund. There's 13.6 positions that do the employee relations, the labor relations, the recruitment, the FMLA, the ADA, and so we have 3 FTEs that are dedicated to boards and commissions. So the Board of Equalization is staffed by 2 FTEs, and civil service is the equivalent of a full FTE. So that leaves us with 10 positions to basically evaluate and work with. Did that answer your question,
Well-
Commissioner Mejia?
And I think it does to a degree, but what about, I don't know what your total of FTEs is, 15, is that?
So we have 20 FTEs, but those are in restricted, the other ones, the 6.4 of them. Here's our other funds. So this is risk, benefits, unemployment, has 6.4 FTEs. And we wouldn't make reductions in those because they're not general fund. So those would remain status quo.
When you said vacancy, but we eliminate that position, right? We're not relying on
we're
vacancy savings for
proposing,
this.
yeah.
Yes,
So-
elimination of an FTE, not,
And
not
then-
just not filling it.
Okay, and then you said you don't wanna lose more than one, and that means the one that we were just talking about.
Right.
Okay,
And
I
what
just wanna make
position
sure.
is that?
I'd rather not say for just,
It's a
there's no
filled
final
position
decision.
I thought
and-
it's a vacancy saving, so that's, so
it's
it's
a
not
vacant position that I would not fill and would be part of the cuts that Commissioner Edwards is asking about.
I'm sorry, it's vacant or it's filled? I heard two things.
It's vacant,
It's vacant.
Then
So
why
you
can't we know what the
could
position
say,
is?
but you'd prefer not to?
It makes employees pretty edgy, I suppose.
So we know we should not talk about filled positions due to notifications and all the reasons that Jane laid out.
The pink
But
slip
if
business
they're-
of
yep.
90 days. or
If
whatever.
they're vacant,
Do we have any hope about
sorry
going-
to put you on the spot.
Do we have any hope of going back on the state when they mandate something through legislation? That we can put in for an unfunded mandate to cover just those things that Maria pointed out? If they continued to add to the workload and we never got any resources, they didn't change the 1585 tax structure or something like that to adjust for it. Why can't we take action against the state? There's a specific law against unfunded mandates being dumped on the junior, we're the junior taxing district in
Right,
that
there
case.
is an unfunded mandate law, but the state has lots of ways to get around that, as you know. There's no reason that we couldn't talk to Wasac about the possibility of going after the state, but there's no claim process where we could go to them as a county and say, hey, this is an unfunded mandate. We certainly, I mean, we could talk to our attorneys about that if you'd like to launch a complaint with the state, but
No, I guess not.
we wouldn't have any luck.
Do we
Yes.
have that 10-year financial plan for human resources for?
We don't for general fund if they don't manage the fund, and you have the financial plan for the general fund in the form of the forecast that we prepare.
So nothing,
But each one of these, say we were to save any actual cuts by a savings from vacancy savings to cover the, whatever the $100 and some $1,000. That doesn't help us for next year when we're doing a 2-year budget, we need to reduce our baseline that continues on.
Vacancy savings does not help
Yeah,
us,
and that
which is
doesn't
why I
address
said-
the issue
And
that
Maria
we're faced
says
with.
that there is a position that she's considering, a vacant position.
Okay. Well, maybe that'll do it.
okay, and so then 13.6 positions are funded out of general fund, and so then basically it would be 12.6 next year.
12.6. How long has the position been vacant?
So part of my hesitation is that I had a retirement, and so I am going through a recruitment process, anticipating internal candidate to apply, and then whatever vacancy that leaves. So that's why I'm kind of hemming and hawing.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you've got 20 and 14 are funded or something out of general fund, I guess, in your situation, do you do all the hiring for the elected officials as well as the road department and
All of
garbage
those.
collection and
So
all
we
that?
do the-
So I'm wondering how come more isn't out of dedicated funds to your shop?
So that is achieved through the indirect cost plan. HR is part of the indirect cost plan. So we fund it up front with general fund money, and then on a 2-year lag, we recover on the 60-40 split to the maximum amount possible based on FTEs is the allocation method for HR. And they're part of the cost plan that Ron Haney prepares.
I guess why isn't it closer to the 60-40 than it is?
Well, because there are a lot of FTEs in the general fund. And so this whole, so let's say their budget for 2023 is $2.4 million. If they were to spend that entire amount, and they don't anticipate it, they're gonna revert roughly $270,000. Whatever they do spend, approximately 50%, roughly 50%, I think, for HR, will come back to the general fund. In 2025, that becomes revenue to the general fund for all of the other, from all the restricted funds.
Why is it on a lag? I don't get that.
So you don't understand the lag. The way the lag works is, we spend it this year, we close the year, so you spend the money in 2023. You close the fiscal year for 2023 in 2024. That's how you know exactly how much to bill out to the other funds, and you bill that out in 2025. That's the 2-year lag. You have to close the year so you know how much to bill out in the future year. There's 2 ways to bill out indirect. One is the 2-year lag that I just described. The other method that Central Services uses is on a prospective basis. And that's where you estimate what you're gonna spend. You bill that out in the year that you spend it. And then every year at the end of the year, you have to do a reconciliation where you're either gonna have to charge more next year because you didn't charge enough, or you charge less next year because you charge too much. So either way, you've got to figure out exactly what you spent, because this is where internal service is not allowed to make a profit.
Okay, out of the reversion dollar amount, I don't know, something like 300,000 gonna get
Yeah,
reverted.
roughly 270,000 is the current
Okay,
estimate.
so it's gonna get reverted back that we're gonna depend on for year-end funding balance. But if we were to have to cut somebody's position, why not only have her revert back 150,000 and keep that so that we can keep these employees that we need? Because I don't doubt that we need them. It's just, why do we have to revert back?
So you may recall that in the forecast each year, there's an assumed reversion that contributes to the fund balance. And you see right here on this, the mini forecast that Nicole gave you this morning, it's a 5.7 million reversion that contributes to this $33 million fund balance. If they weren't reverting this money, the fund balance would be significantly less, exactly right. So we count on a reversion.
So,
But yet we budget that to those individual entities and elected officials. So it's kind of like smoke and mirrors. We give it to them and then we take it away.
It's not smoke and mirrors, so we don't take it away. What the law says is that at the close of the fiscal year, all money reverts. So it's part of state law that it works this way.
Good to know.
Now, we could, I have seen other counties do this. We could say, okay, you, and I'm just gonna use you for an example, you HR regularly revert 10% of your budget, so we're just gonna budget you at 10% less. I've seen other counties do that. In this county, we allow the offices to use as much of their appropriation. And this also follows state law. State law says that once the board sets the appropriation, that is the limit of what offices and departments have to spend. Only we know from experience they don't spend everything. So overall, they revert anywhere between 3%, and lately it's been a lot more than that. So we assume that there's gonna be some reversion.
I don't know if that's
But we
completely
try to
fair.
give the elected officials and appointed directors the flexibility to do what they need to do in the amount that you allow.
But some elected officials actually towards the end of the year do massaging and pretty soon they're turning in $2.
Some
So-
of them do.
And so
The
is that
assessor.
fair to those other officials that don't? I guess that's,
Well,
I'm trying to be
that's-
fair with everybody concerned, including our employees that are the ones that are on the hook here.
That's right.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm done harping.
Thank you. Okay, Maria, I have a question. So going to reversions, right? You have in 2023, there's a supposed reversion of 10.87. And just looking kind of through the years, right? On the second page. I'm seeing that in the past couple of years, it's been, 2019, it was 12%, 2020 was 11, and then of course, 2021 was such an odd year, it was 19, and then 22, 20%. And then this year, 10%, right? So it hasn't for a couple of years, and so I'm wondering what's being reverted back?
So, since I've been in this position in 2019, it's been salary savings. In particular, and I think that's why you're seeing it across the county, it's been very difficult to fill positions. And I think it was 2021 where I had 5 vacancies. As hard as I tried to fill those positions, I couldn't, and that was probably the year where it was on the higher end. For instance, this year I had 2 positions that were vacant towards the beginning of the year, and I have 1 now. So that's mostly what you're seeing. Yeah, so that would be the bulk of it. And those positions that I just mentioned have been in the general fund.
So you're saying, sorry, I'm having trouble with my notepad. But, okay, so I understand the whole, it's been really difficult to hire positions, right? But 10% and you only have 1 vacancy today,
But I had 2 vacancies earlier this year.
and then has it just been a continuation of vacancies?
From year to year, yes. Anywhere from 1 to 5 at the high point. And besides personnel, we don't have a lot of money. I was just looking at my discretionary funding in the general fund, and I think that's about $70,000, and that goes towards professional services, training, some miscellaneous things like that, small tools and equipment. And so that, go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, you're reminding me of something you said earlier where you said the 1 position would pretty much would cover most of it. You'd have a little more to make up, and you said something about reduced work hours or something, like how, I guess,
Exploring,
how would you be able to close the gap between whatever that 1 position is and 185,000
it
without?
would be exploring like maybe a 36-hour work week where employees' positions are reduced, so we're not laying people off, but the cumulative effect of those reduction in hours helps us meet, I think it's about $50,000 gap that I'm trying to meet there. My understanding was we're supposed to look at position reductions and not necessarily say, oh, well, I don't need this training money, but then in a few years I come and say, please give me training money, right? So it's not a permanent.
Thank you, Maria, you understood.
Sustainable, yes.
I'm paying attention.
Thank you. But, oh, well, okay, let me ask this. Something like this 36-hour work week, and I don't know the employees and some of them might like it, some of them might hate it, but is that something that's sustainable from your perspective? If it had to be, I mean, hopefully it wouldn't have to be, but we have to assume that we're trying to reduce the baseline here.
So when I look, so I did a 5-year workload evaluation and I highlighted some of them. So like recruitments in 2018, we did 200, in 2022, 416, that's 108% increase. New hires increased by 63%. You look at the BOE work has always fluctuated, but in 2022, they saw 61%. FMLA, we saw that increase by 28%. The Washington State Paid Family Leave, that was new in 2022, but that year alone, we had 116 users of that. And you'll see a huge increase in labor and industries claims. And some of that is due to some of the changes with things like PTSD now being, employees can now make claims for PTSD. So when I look at this trend, working with fewer employees is gonna be hard, and that's why it's trying to figure out what are we gonna do? And there's not that much HR does that's just nice to do or frivolous or anything like that.
Well, in some level too, I mean, from an observation, you are, you have to react
Right.
to what's going on, and you look at the metrics in 2018, different environment than there was in 2022 in the amount of churn of those vacancies, the amount of recruitments, et cetera. So your workload actually goes up.
It goes up,
Yeah,
like it will
wonders.
go up if we go into a layoff mode. That increases that workload.
So the question is, you know, especially with recruitment being recruitment, retention, I'm sure you're getting bombarded from
Yes, I am.
everyone
Daily.
about, you know, those conversations, right? And then they're using you as that recruitment tool as well, but the reduction in hours, right? Well, it helps. You know, I guess you know, I just don't see it being sustainable. It's going back to Commissioner Menser's question, right? Like
Then I'm faced with either reducing a position by halftime or depending on how it's like the funding for the position, potentially lose 2 positions. So
didn't last.
that's part of the analysis, right? Like this is fairly new, right? Like we're going through this process, and so I haven't done the in-depth analysis to answer your questions completely.
So going back to policy decisions that we made a couple of years ago, we decided to increase the training budget. I remember it was by,
I think was $20,000.
and that was something that realistically we didn't have before, right? And so just, you know, the board was like, we have this available funding, right? Yes, we want to invest more in our employees during this time, have more training opportunities available. But before that, right, we still had the baseline of trainings available. It's not like, you know, so I
Wouldn't go to 0, but it's less than what they'd have now.
yeah, and so like we increased it though, like it's not like we. And
But if the board says I can look at, so I've just been looking at FTE reductions because that was the instruction as
So-
I understood it. But if
Other-
there's some
other
latitude
items.
to look at, oh, well, 2 years ago, we got $20,000.
additionally, I mean,
Yes.
those previous policy requests, I feel like those are where you're still being sustainable, right? And that was an increase that the board had discussion on, and it was just because we had a little bit of wiggle room. We're like, yeah, you know, like, sure, let's open up a little bit more of those trainings. But again, it's, you know, if I'm,
So the reason that we focused on FTEs was because we've heard from so many offices and departments that they don't have enough training money, that they need more equipment, that they you know, the discretionary types of spending that are not personnel or indirect are just, they're already much too low. But if you have capacity, let's say, or the board, as Commissioner Mahee is saying, recently added money that you would put on the table to take away, then yes, that's perfectly
I'll take
okay.
a look
Versus a partial FTE. or
Yes,
something.
versus an FTE, a piece of an FTE. If that would get you there, then
I'll see
absolutely.
what, how,
I don't know how rigid we're gonna be about time, but since Maria did not get to make her presentation about her policy asks.
I don't know that I
I-
should, I
well,
think I
I-
should just call it quits while I can walk out of here.
Well, I really need to ask you about the risk analyst, cause the first two are general fund, and unless you can
Okay.
tell me why the building will collapse if we don't fund them, I'm not, probably can't do that, but this one, risk fund, my question is, what's the general fund? Is this the 60-40 split? And just because it's risk fund, it gets billed out and it's gonna actually impact the general fund at a reduced level, or how should we be thinking about that third position? That's
So
risk fund funding.
it is from a restricted fund. What I will add about the risk fund is that they actually do recoveries. And so recently they've recovered $61,000 in workers' compensation for employee wages and equipment. That's by participating in the Stay at Work program, which they briefed you on, I think it was last year. And they've recovered over the last 2 years, $268,000 related to county property damage claims. So the work that they do actually helps us recuperate, and those claims, it's here in my presentation, but they've seen huge increases in some of these property damage claims and things like that. So there is some opportunity there that they're bringing in, or they're not bringing in money, but they're recuperating money on
Let's
behalf
say
of
they
the
weren't
county.
doing that. How is the position funded vis-à-vis general fund versus the restricted fund?
So the risk pool is a fund where we have to maintain a certain level of fund balance, it's fund 50-50. And they bill out their costs, so the amount is partially based on experience ratings and partially based on a number of other allocation factors. FTEs is one of them. And the impact to the general fund would probably be, because you've got Public Works and the sheriff are two of the biggest
For work,
users of the
yes.
risk fund. I'd say it'd probably be about 50% general fund on a 2-year lag.
Okay, so I just wanna make it clear, it's not like, we're gonna see things on this list that are from restricted funds 100%. There is no general
That's
fund
right.
impact. And in that case,
But the ones you see today,
but the one I'm seeing here, even though it doesn't say general fund, there is a general fund impact.
in the long run,
And that's gotta be,
at least part of it.
Yeah,
and I think the board needs to just hear that.
well,
For each
yeah,
one.
and I wanna go through all I wanna give Maria that opportunity, right, because we're gonna give them to the rest, and I know it's expanding on our time. But I think just if we're gonna give everyone else the opportunity to go through their positions, right, I think Maria also gets that. So, Maria, if you want to talk about the policy level change requests that you're requesting, just knowing that, the conversation.
No, I think we've covered it just in terms of the workload that we have seen in increasing, and as the county itself increases in FTEs, then that just creates more work for human resources. And as Rob said, we are often reactionary, so we have very little opportunity to be strategic. And in the coming years, we've got the TC Connect, and so it's going to have a new recruitment module. So we're gonna have to teach offices and departments countywide how to use this new system. It'll have a new learning management system. So there's this anticipated workload that I was planning on as I made these requests. So my request was for a generalist HR analyst and a specialist to support the analyst. Other thing that I rarely get to do is to bring updated personnel policies to you. They're sorely needed. So just that would have built more capacity because I actually have absorbed a lot of work throughout the years. You see me before you doing a lot of different things. And so that would help me delegate some work so then I can also focus in being more strategic and looking at our workforce metrics and then trying to adapt to those things rather than this constant reaction. That's the perfect word. We're just very reactionary.
But you know, we're gonna have to continue to react because we're gonna remain a training ground for other government entities as long as we continue to not treat our employees as well as we should. And that can cover a lot of bases, so you're never gonna get away from training because we're gonna have a rotation of new people coming in. We're gonna train people here and they're gonna go somewhere else where they're treated better. And until we get ahead of that, we gotta have training or you're not gonna be able to train people to how to teach others to use that new system, if you will, or something. So it's a never-ending cycle that doesn't seem to get any better by cutting back on your ability to provide that. So it's
Well, I
kinda like we
appreciate
keep
your
shooting ourselves in the foot at every turn. And unfortunately, this is a turn of 360 degrees, which is constant.
Do we have the cost for the policy level request?
Total cost
Or
for
the
the
cost for
policy?
each one of them for,
Yes,
We
we
can get that for
do,
you. Yeah.
and we,
We can get that information for you.
yeah, we'll get that printed out for you.
I put this together
Super
10
fast.
minutes before the meeting, so I didn't
Yeah.
have all that information available, but I can add it.
Yeah, I mean, just throw a column right in there and
Yeah.
plug it in from the spreadsheet would be useful.
May I ask a clarifying question and it also makes, I think, training, so this is a statement, not a question. But training often, it's often an easy place to cut, but there are unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah.
Right? When we don't train our supervisors or managers adequately, that potentially opens us for other risk and other costs down the road. So the question I had though was related to the leave buyout. And just the 10-year projection there, it seems to, I was curious about sort of the annual experience. Cause it's only 25% of the buyouts, right? But of the annual experience, what is the goal that we're trying to shoot for? Cause it just looks like it's continuing to build fund balance versus trying to get to a point of, sustaining an annual balance, basically, that would be adequate.
So it's actually a new fund we started managing in, is it
22?
2022?
Mhm.
And it had seed money of $500,000 and offhand, I can't recall how much we're collecting. What we're finding is that offices and departments aren't actually utilizing as much. So some employees will take 2 or 3 months, that they have a lot of leave and so they end up taking
Terminal leave, I'm sorry.
exactly, so they're actually not tapping into that fund and that's why you're seeing that increase.
So I didn't know if there was in the way the cost recovery is set up, if there's some way to
It's,
readjust that.
I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but it's based on a percentage of salaries. And so that's what the basis is. And when we set it up 2 years ago, Maria's talked about this, but we're kind of letting it ride to see how many people actually use it before they made adjustments to what the rates were gonna be, or conversely, if it expanded.
Right, and that's one that's funded by both restricted and non-restricted, right? So we'd have to figure out how much is of its general fund.
Right, we did some analysis of how much we thought would be used in the first 2 years, and it's fallen way below that, but we're still not quite sure what's going on.
And it's also 25% of retirees, and so if it got expanded to all terminations, that would increase. So we were just kind of taking baby steps in managing this.
I appreciate that, I was just seeing the fund balance projected growth and
It is growing, so one of the things that the board can consider, and we thought we'd get another year's experience under our belt before we propose this, is how do you want to expand it? Because if it continues to be used so little, then you've got some options. You reduce the amount going into the fund, you go from 25% to 50%. You could do not just retirees, but any separation. So there's lots of options here on how to use this money. And it could be that, so we're depositing roughly 300 and anticipating 372,000 next year. You know, you could reduce this, and that would reduce the impact on the general fund by roughly half that much.
How
So you
would-
could put less in this fund.
How would that work if you compare that to the unemployment compensation fund though? Because we've been we've reduced that input, thinking things are better, but things might be getting worse. And so then what do we do?
So the unemployment compensation fund is different. That is a self-insurance pool. We need to maintain that at sufficient money to pay unemployment insurance in the amount, however many people become unemployed and qualified. That is currently an anticipated fund balance of roughly 1.5 million, which is about as low as you wanna go in that fund. And if you look at the financial plan, the highest year of payout is not on here. We wanna look back to just after the Great Recession.
It was between 600,000 and 800,000, as I recall.
How much?
Between 600,000 and 800,000.
$600,000 to $800,000. So we're maintaining 2 years of the highest year payout in recent history.
But you know,
In this
that,
fund.
really what that is that is a fund that, okay, it's dedicated, but say we cut that fund in half, just say we cut it in half. Then if we ended up in a bad situation, we've got the rainy day fund we'd have to fall back on. All that is really an extra fund for just in case. And so are we to that point yet that we're gonna try and save FTEs, save job performance abilities so that we don't expose ourselves to more liability? I don't have the answer, but it's another fund that we could do something with because we have this other fund, takes 3 votes to access it, to cover. And
So if
so
I'll
we could
clarify,
cover
it's a state mandated fund.
Yes.
What we do is we're self-insured. If we were to pay the Employment Security Department, they charge 1.1%
Yeah, they
of
pay
our
more.
payroll, and we're at 0.3 because we've been able to manage it.
right?
So.
But I don't know the rules on the books, but is it possible that we could just refer to our rainy day fund as part of that fund? Because there's not any budgetary drain on the rainy day fund. It's for just in case, just like things go to pot on us and we end up with some FTEs that are laid off and wanna draw unemployment. Maybe we don't have quite enough in there, but we have backup money over here in the rainy day fund that we can access.
Yeah, no, if we're gonna maintain a self-insured pool, then we have to have money in that pool to pay the expense. Now, do you have to maintain a 2-year reserve? No, you don't. You could maintain a reserve of less, and I can see you going,
Well, so
that makes us a little
the
nervous,
future's uncertain,
but-
right? And so we do have to have the money to cover whatever unemployment
Yes.
claims are coming here in the
it's gotta be identified.
months. And my recollection was when we went to be self-insured, and I think it was in the late 80s, is that there was like an application and approval
Yes.
process. And so I'd be hesitant to make any commitments not knowing what the repercussions would be.
Right, but even if you cut the contribution in half for a while, that we're only depositing about 300,000 a year into this fund. This fund balance has built up
Over the
over
years.
many years.
Can I go back to the leave buyout fund? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm just brainstorming with a half a brain.
So the leave buyout fund is 5080, and so just seeing, I know that we've been kind of in that testing phase, but it is growing, right? And could we do maybe a 25% reduction on that
Contribution?
contribution, right? And maybe reduce it, just,
Sure.
and I think even still with that contribution, it leaves us enough space that it can, just kind of for the projected estimates, I think
Yeah.
it will leave us enough. And so if we were to do a 25% reduction, so that would be interfund costs, which that would go to the maintenance level, is that reduction?
It would
Yeah.
reduce the base, and that's fine. We can reduce at any level, it doesn't have to be policy. And if the reduction would be roughly $80,000, and about half of that would be general fund, so it'd save 40,000 a year. And every little bit counts.
I'm like every.
But absolutely, we could do that. So we're gonna keep a running list of ideas as we go.
I mean, even a 50% would be really kind of tightening it up, but I think maybe a 25% but maybe those two, 25 and 50, and then the board can decide what later on, whether that's something that they would be interested in doing. It would,
Absolutely. Yep.
okay,
Anything else?
anything else for
I'm glad I
Maria?
was the first to start. I
Guinea
hope there's some
pig.
You're done.
lessons learned
Yeah.
for others.
Thank you for being
Not
first
for me,
up.
thank you, Maria, for putting up
Thank you.
with us. Thank you.
Who's next, central services?
Do me a favor, your external power supply has a really bright light on
Really?
it, it's like a flashlight or something,
I thought there was a way to get rid of that, but.
I don't know.
Is he shining it in your eyes?
Yeah.
Feel like you're being interrogated, Ron?
Interrogated or is like.
It
it's
is
gonna
pretty
cause
bright,
a-
right now that he turned it, I was like, ooh,
It's gonna cause a seizure.
okay,
Alright,
who's central services?
Do you have a power plug?
I got it.
You came back from vacation for this.
I do. So who's kicking us off for central services? We're pulling up the PowerPoint.
So Bruce, huge appreciation to Bruce, who is taking the lead on central services while I'm the interim county manager. So Bruce is gonna lead you through the central services presentation, and I'll chime in.
Good afternoon. As said, I'm Bruce. I'm briefing on behalf of Central Services with a lot of assistance from the other staff here today. I'm here with Jetty, Admin Services Manager, Jason, Facilities Manager, Jenny, Fiscal Manager, and Rick Thomas, Capital Projects Planning Manager. And they'll be providing additional detail in their respective portions of the presentation. Central Services is exactly what the name says, provides a wide range of services to offices and departments across the county. By putting these types of services in a single department, we can hire staff who have expertise in their field, which creates efficiencies and better service. Central Services consists of 5 elements: facilities, capital project team, administrative services, fiscal services, and ER&R or fleet services. Facilities maintains approximately 600,000 square feet of county-owned buildings. As part of maintaining the buildings, they also manage the contracts for custodial, landscaping, and administer service levels and payments of utilities. The capital projects team, who you will also see identified as the engineering team, has an oversight of all the capital projects for property owned by the county. Administrative Services Division provides countywide mail services, record services, surplus services, administers contracts, and provides administrative support throughout central services. Fiscal Services resides within central services and manages the internal budget and accounting services for the department, but they also have countywide function because they bill out not only for central services, but for IT, bill out the cost of cell phones, computers, utilities. So they have oversight and responsibility for about $10 million in business every year. Equipment rental and replacement is the fleet division. We maintain all the vehicles and equipment, and we keep a savings fund for large equipment so that we can buy it and not have to incur debt when it's up for replacement or when it's up for replacement, either scheduled or unscheduled. Any questions on?
Any questions?
I do have some questions, but I don't know how much time we've got.
We have 45 minutes.
We got 45 minutes. Okay, how much fuel do you guys burn up?
Approximately 300,000 gallons a year.
About 300,000 a year.
100,000 diesel and 200,000 unleaded.
Okay.
So the
And
price of gas is one of those things that's pretty important in central
You think that
services.
adds to inflation?
Not behind it.
Matter of fact, I can't think of one thing that the price of fuel does not increase. Whether it's transportation, growing food, plastic, it doesn't matter what it is, there's not one thing, and I'd like to have somebody tell me something that's not affected by the price of fuel. Anyway, I'll just throw that out there as
That's
my
not a-
challenge.
That's a rhetoric question.
it does represent a significant percentage of the ERMR operating budget, 20 to 25%. Here are the 5 funds managed by central services. This slide addresses our 2024 budget. The first column identifies the fund, the second is estimated fund balance at the beginning of the year, third is revenues in, fourth is expenditures out, and fifth is the projected fund balance at the end of 24. First fund overview is 5210, which is the fund that supports day-to-day operations by our facilities and admin services and fiscal services divisions. Revenues and expenditures are roughly equal for 5210 and 5220. That is
5210, you said day-to-day operations is what it
Yes.
covers? Okay.
Second fund is Building Reserves Fund, which build facilities uses to fund repairs to county-owned buildings. This is where the projects for maintenance and repair of major components of the buildings. This is where the funding for those comes from. Engineering Fund is where the capital project management team expenditures are. Their revenues are from their time built projects, and expenditures are the salaries for the project managers. Fourth fund is the ERNR Maintenance and Operations Fund. That is the fund which you asked about the fuel, this fund covers the fuel. So out of that 5.9 and expenditures, about 1.4 of that is projected fuel costs.
Can you talk about that fund? I mean, I guess what I think of as ER&R is probably the replacement reserves. So what goes into ER&R, M&O?
Sure, this fund covers staff salaries, vehicle parts, fuel, and commercial repair not performed by the county, such as body work.
So these are your mechanics.
Okay, there's just, that cost is just built into.
Yeah.
Our system. Okay, didn't know that.
Fifth fund is the ER&R replacement fund, which exists to have funds available for both scheduled and unscheduled replacement of county vehicles and equipment. Each asset has a replacement year and an estimated replacement cost. And each year a rate is calculated so that when the vehicle is due replacement, the funds are available to purchase a new vehicle. Surplus vehicle is sold and the proceeds are returned to this replacement fund.
Now, before you go on, are you gonna accept questions right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Is that okay, Madam Chair? Okay, so ER&R replacement, let's just use that as an example. So the beginning fund balance is 26 million. And ending fund balance for 24 is 27 million. In the meantime, you're proposing getting in 9 million in revenue and expending 8 million in revenue. So what's the difference? Where do we subtract, where do we subtract from or add to come out with the 27 million on the end, on the ending fund balance? I take it that's ending fund balance. I can't see the,
It's 27.
yeah, ending fund balance.
27.3.
So why do we have I don't know,
Why do we have that much money
Yes,
sitting in
why
that
do we
fund,
have
and why do we
that
have to
much
keep paying in?
in that fund, and I hope it's drawing interest at about 5.5% now.
Do we not sweep the interest from that
I
fund?
think this interest is swept.
And that should be
Interest.
substantial to what it was 2 or 3 years ago.
So the interest to this fund is swept into the general fund?
Yeah, and it should be a substantial amount.
It does contribute to the millions of dollars deposited.
So just using that
Into
as an
the general
example,
fund.
give me an idea, what is swept into the account?
So I was
Is it
just
$1
gonna
million?
To speak to the interest, so when we went through the general fund forecast, we saw that the huge increase in the general fund projected revenues was because of interest, and so this is a portion of that.
So what percentage are we talking about?
I can't tell
Just
you
roughly.
exactly what's coming from this fund, but I know that we had budgeted inside of our interest was like 1.5 million, and we're looking at more like 3 to 4 coming in this year.
And then getting back to my original question, why do you keep that fund balance to that extent if we could do something else? Is it because of an emergency situation may develop or what? But I'm just curious how, we talk about reversion, diversion, all kinds of things that can take place. And I'm always looking for, where can I look? And this looks to me like where I can look. So try and convince me that this isn't a good spot to look.
Talk about how you determine the amount of money that's paid into this fund.
Certainly. So, the way that rates are calculated, it's per asset. So, for example, let's use a sheriff patrol vehicle. This year, we're planning on $83,000-ish to replace a single patrol vehicle. So if we replace a vehicle this year, it needs to be replaced in 6 years. We will calculate an inflationary factor, so let's just say $90,000 in 6 years, which is probably not enough, but
More probably.
we're gonna divide that by the 6-year life cycle and we're gonna collect $15,000 a year for that vehicle. So a vehicle in the fund, even though it's not due to be replaced for 2 to 3 years, may have a $30,000 to $40,000 balance. And so you're looking at the aggregate of hundreds of assets in the county fleet.
How many?
Hundreds.
Hundreds?
So
What do we
there's,
have, about 700 vehicles or something like that?
700 pieces of equipment and vehicles, but that doesn't touch the sheriff's small asset replacement fund as well, where there's a substantial amount being collected for the replacement of tasers, body armor, and other associated
It
equipment.
still seems like that's a pretty flush fund.
It seems so, but when you look, there is exactly the amount being saved for each piece of equipment that we have to replace when the time comes. And one of the things that Bruce does, Bruce and his team every year sit down with each office or department and say, this is your list of vehicles, and this is when we're estimating they need replaced. How many miles have you driven if it's a car? Are you getting the wear and tear? Is it gonna last 6 years, or maybe it's gonna last 7? And we collect a little less every year. But the goal is that when the time comes to replace that thing, that there is money in the fund to replace it at that time. And this is calculated to be exactly what we need.
And that's true, I agree with you 100%, but there's $20 million in that fund at the
That's
end to be able
because
to
we
do
have,
that.
what
20
would you
million.
say our total value of assets is?
I was gonna say, don't we have a list that we have to say what our asset value is?
Yes.
And this should be more than that because of inflationary factor, but it should be like comparable, right?
That's right.
Within an inflationary percentage.
So we're never gonna replace them all at the same time.
Not at the same time, but this doesn't assume you'll replace them at
money's
the
not
same
there,
time.
so-
This assumes you'll replace them when the time comes. So while these years that you're looking at, 24 and 25 are years where we're asking to pay in more than we pay out, there are years where you're going to pay out a lot more than what gets paid in. And the money has to be there at that time. Now, if what you're going toward is, can we contribute less to the savings accounts? The reserve accounts, building reserves and ER&R reserve. We've done that before, but it's not sustainable because eventually you do have to replace that sheriff vehicle. Eventually you do need to replace the Vector equipment and the yard goat and the bulletproof vests and the whatever else we save up for in this account. And when there's not enough money there, then they come to the board and say, I need
I
more
don't
money
think
for
there's
equipment.
ever been not enough money there since I've been.
There has been years, not
Not since I've
when
been here.
you were on the board, but in the early years when I was with the county, the Board of County Commissioners had to make an agreement with the sheriff, Sheriff Kimball, and then Sheriff Snaza in the early years of his term on how we would collect enough money to get the vehicles replaced because enough had not been collected. And this money is coming from restricted funds, and because it is, we can't use the money that Public Works pays in to buy a sheriff's vehicle. It's gotta be accounted for in a very specific way.
But that still doesn't explain the extra 20 million that rolls right along to the end. It just doesn't cover it exactly, cause I've been through this whole budgeting exercise when I was sheriff, I had to do that.
Sure.
And I'm not complaining, I'm just saying I understand it pretty well, and there was always money there. Matter of fact, Bachman had something to do with it, something at one point, he come and got all my money one time out of there.
So-
No, Tom Fitzsimmons did.
Tom, yeah,
Yeah, Tom
Tom.
did that to me one time, but, and it was a lot of money that we'd saved.
It was a lot of money that you built up, but then, and I think it was not too long after that, when I was making a deal with Sheriff Kimball on how to get that money replaced.
Sheriff has to
And
run
we
his
were
shop a
like
little tighter.
300,000 a year for 3 years, in addition to what would normally go in.
Okay, you still haven't
not
convinced me that
sustainable.
that's not a fund that we can review. And when it comes to what goes in and out of that fund, general fund goes into the fund and then it can't be taken out of the fund except for general fund purchase.
That's
you know, like
exactly
the
right,
sheriff's office.
it goes out to buy
Okay, well,
sheriff equipment.
all I'm gonna do is just encourage you to take a look at that and see if we can't save a couple FTEs of our county employees so we can continue to provide services, that's all.
Bruce,
That's it, ma'am.
thank you, sir. My question for you is, so for this fund, like it's public works vehicles and those can run up. I mean, I went striping and they were telling me it was, you know, they're like, oh, you know, just this little piece, it's like over $1 million, and I was just astounded at. So a lot of this that we're seeing is just those heavy equipment purchases from public works, not necessarily just county vehicles.
Correct.
So it's heavy machinery as well.
Yeah, so the Vector is a good example. Those are just rough ballpark, $500,000 a piece. There's 3 of them. So that represents potential 1.5 million in expenditures when they come due. Now, they are spread out over the years. We've ordered one this year.
That's for the striping vehicle,
That's a Vector truck, so it
sucking out the,
sucks.
What happens, for example, if, you know, a vehicle is purchased and you mentioned unplanned, and, you know, there's accident or whatever where a vehicle is damaged, how does this, you know, seeing that it's restrictive and kind of what you pay into it, there's basically, how does that work out? If someone has an accident, the vehicle is totaled, and maybe they're on year 3 of 6.
So in that case, what happens is you go before the board, you get a budget amendment, and we request a budget amendment for authority to purchase a replacement vehicle for one that was either stolen or damaged beyond repair. The fund purchases a new vehicle. We track that expenditure against the asset. So the asset actually starts out with a negative balance. The fund as a whole is positive, but that particular replaced asset starts life at a negative dollar value. It still has its sheriff patrol vehicle 6 years from replacement. So instead of collecting the $90,000 I referred to, it might be collecting $135,000 over the next 6 years to get it up to where it needs to be for its following replacement. So the fund as a whole covers the shortfall, but the asset itself and its operating costs reflect the cost of the accident.
I guess going to the sheriff's, this year we replaced the kind of engine, I think it was,
Right.
that goes into the vehicles, and so that, you know, and we allotted some general fund money in order to kind of replace, and some of it was because of the expense in the vehicles, and the other one was because of the new upgraded engine. And so wondering how those changes play into kind of this fund balance. Is it more that's coming out and in the future, or?
So in that case, we increased the replacement cost of this year's vehicles. There was a shortfall, so the board was requested to add additional money to reserves to cover the difference between the planned vehicle replacement and the upgraded vehicle replacement. Going forward, the upgraded vehicle option will be incorporated in the cost of the vehicle when we're projecting replacement costs.
Inflation.
and that therein was an offset cost of maintenance that would have taken place had we not done that.
Okay,
Ready to go on?
ready to go on? Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Similar slide for 25. Operating costs remain relatively flat. You can see building reserves, the proposed expenditures are less than the revenues. So that touches on whether the reserve balance is going up or down. In 24, it's projected to go down. In 25, it's projected to go up. That's the nature of the funding for the planned projects for the CIP, which you review and approve every year. Any questions looking at 25?
Quick question really when it relates to supply chain. If you're looking at the expenditures, how have you had to adapt, because you've had this 6-year replacement schedule, but now because of supply chain, you have to start or potentially initiate something sooner,
Yes.
because of the longer lead time to get something factored into the budgeting.
So Robin touched on the annual meetings with customers every year. And what we did this year is we identified certain vehicles that get heavy use. And the supply chain delays will negatively impact the operating rates. And we worked with customers to move up select assets. We did not do a wholesale across the board, subtract a year off life cycles. We're doing it on a case by case review, particularly with regards to their utilization.
Okay.
Next slide is a roll-up of the central services budget as a whole.
So one of the things to note here, two things actually, is central service has no direct general fund money. It's all, impact on general fund is through the rates. And then the other thing to note here is that unlike many, offices and departments, personnel is not the biggest cost in central services. And you'll see, for example, in 2023, the personnel budget is just over $6 million and the other costs are 26.5 million.
You're not buying the asphalt and things like that for public works though, are you?
No, they buy their own asphalt, but we buy the trucks
Fuel
that
and
lay it
stuff,
down.
yeah.
And all the trucks and we buy the parts for the buildings and we buy the utilities, we pay for the utilities and the what all do we pay for? Just all the stuff that everybody uses. And these aren't just the costs of central services. These are the county-wide costs of utilities, fuel, phones is in the next budget you'll see, but it's that infrastructure that everyone relies on to be able to do business.
The brief opportunities and challenges for each section, so I'll be followed by Jason Ash to present the opportunities and challenges faced by facilities in 2024 and 25.
Good afternoon. So a couple opportunity or challenges we have within facilities are, as Robin talked, we pay all the utilities, water, sewer, garbage, shred services. We're seeing a rising cost in those. We're
How
seeing.
much?
Last year was 12%. This year they're expecting 7 to 8%.
What's that, getting close to 20%, isn't it? What's inflation, Robin? What'd you say inflation was? Never mind.
4% in this month.
So
Okay,
so we're seeing rising costs in all of our supplies. We're also seeing it in the outside labor that we bring in, the vendors. And it's hard to find qualified employees even for them, so that's driving their cost up. Which this leads to the next slide you'll see in a moment here, which will lead to our policy level request that you'll see soon. The other thing is with the aging equipment of the buildings and all the buildings getting much older, we're experiencing high maintenance cost of all the equipment as the facilities are past their life expectancy. So that's if we can even find parts and pieces to repair them or staff that have the knowledge to repair them. So that's really driving up our costs. So, and I'll turn over for the third bullet point to Rick Thomas with capital projects.
Yeah, thank you, Rick Thomas, and I'm gonna talk to you for a moment about an opportunity that we have. What we would like to do is to establish a countywide asset management program and literally just directly for the facilities. And very interesting conversation that we just had with the ER&R, because this is similar to that, but it's on the facilities side. What this program will help us to do is to develop a long-range capital expenditure program to maintain our buildings. It will basically integrate right into what Jason is doing in regards to maintaining the building. So it will allow us to do an inventory of all of the building equipment that we have, to do a conditions assessment of those assets so that we can project on a timeline what the cash flow requirements might need to be in order to maintain or to determine when the life cycle is done and get to a replacement perspective on that. This asset management plan will also allow us to be able to look out 20 to 40 years into the future and try to forecast what the actual space needs might be for all the different county agency groups. We know for sure the county's gonna grow, and because of that, we're gonna need more space than we have presently. Space costs money, and so this capital asset program will allow us to basically put together a capital funding program that allows us with a software program to run different types of capital, I'm gonna say plans, capital initiatives. We can determine what might happen if we have a certain amount of money one year but don't have it the next. And overall, it just was gonna help us to develop our capital improvement plan as well as what our maintenance program should be. And one of the last slide you'll actually see is just kind of a recap of our capital projects for the next 6 years. And what our hope is that this asset management program will, in the future, really help us to develop what that program is gonna look like. And to be able to do updated really on a growing annual. So,
This is one of the opportunities for central services. We don't need funding, we have funding in the budget that we can pay to have this plan developed. But what it'll do is it will help us plan for the future, assess how much money we need. And I also think that having this will position us to be able to look for grant opportunities and ways to fund it. It wouldn't all just be on a pay in more for your building reserve fund. So it's trying to get better handle on what the county needs for the buildings that we live in.
What's the dollar amount that it'll cost to implement this?
We don't know yet. That's part of what we're figuring out.
although we will be coming to you coincidentally, I'm hoping by the end of this month with some information about what the contract will be, and just in ballpark, it's for the whole program we're looking at to get it off the ground and running is in the $100,000 range for everything to get it up and going.
But then there's ongoing commitment to making a deposit, and that's what we need to, that's gonna be the
That is
substantial
part of
amount.
what we've got to figure out is, you've heard repeatedly from citizens that we don't maintain the buildings that we own. Well, we need a better view on what that is gonna take, what it's gonna cost, and then to come up with a plan on how to pay for it.
While we're laying people off, I'm gonna watch that real tight about, it's not the initiation of developing the plan. It's
Right.
putting the plan in play and how many dollars that's gonna take out of each one of these funding sources to make it happen. And that's where it is the wrong rub while we're laying people off, in my estimation.
I understand that, but again, that's why when you look at this plan and you see the layout that we're planning in 25 on our buildings dropping, even though we know the need is great, it's because we need to figure out where to best spend the $11 million that's sitting in this fund. Where is that really needed? How can we invest it better to maintain the buildings better longer? You just heard Jason say how the
Escalation of
aging
cost.
equipment is making the maintenance costs go up. So we've gotta get a better handle on that, and that's what this plan will do.
An opportunity is the rapid expansion and capabilities of electric vehicles. We're starting to see light duty trucks and SUVs being offered by manufacturers that are more suitable for county use than vehicles that have been offered in the past. The building reserves, which we've discussed several times, is not intended for or sufficient to cover the cost of this expansion that is needed. So Central Services is working with Rebecca Harvey to identify grant-funded sources to help the county's program to electrify its fleet.
Can you elaborate a little more on the improvements in electric vehicle capabilities?
Certainly, so in the last 2 years, I would say, we're getting Class 2A trucks, so half-ton trucks, F-250s, Silverado 1500s, vehicles of that size on the market. Not all of them are configured the way the county would need. Like, the county needs a lot of two-wheel drive, long bed, not necessarily a crew cab truck, so they're not offered in the full range of options that we're gonna be needing, but they're starting to become available. And so
What's
that's what we're-
what's it cost to run an EV per mile versus, you know, the purchase price, operating cost, fuel, everything that it takes per mile for internal combustion versus EV?
A lot depends on the miles driven. So for a complete analysis, we'd have to get
I mean, I
back to you.
really think that'd be something worth discussing, because I know you don't have oil changes, a lot of times you don't have brake jobs, you know, there's a lot of maintenance issues that play into it, but that'd be worth hearing about at some point.
Yes, so calculators are offered through various entities that assist with calculating the total cost of ownership of vehicles. And we do that analysis when we move forward with electric vehicles. The fifth bullet addresses a challenge. The rapid price increases over the last 3 years are driving up the cost of doing business, and rates have to go up to accommodate that. So
I think that's also known as inflation.
Alright,
So the one policy level request we have from Central Services this year is for a facilities control specialist. You can see on the slide, the top of the range, I believe, is 122,000. By IFSA standards, which is the Facility Management Association, based upon the 600,000 square feet the county has, we should have a total of 34 staff to maintain them. We currently are funded for 14. So having this position would result in much faster response times for HVAC complaints, which we receive a large number of, especially with the aging buildings. And the systems aren't designed for the remodels that have taken place over the years. Currently, we spend around 55,000 per year on bringing vendors in to do upgrades to the systems, make minor changes and whatnot, but that's annually we spend that. I expect that to go up, as I said, with the aging cost of the buildings, and also as vendors cannot find workforce to meet the needs. I also currently, to get someone in from a vendor to do these upgrades or make these changes, it typically takes 3 to 4 weeks, which result in a lot more complaints from the occupants of the building. So This, I will say, this would be approximately 70% general fund and 30% non-general fund. We would see some cost savings. Like I said, we wouldn't have to go out with the vendor. I also feel as though with the knowledge that this position would provide, with some minimal training, we could use them in other aspects, such as the camera control systems and also for the fire alarm systems, which a large portion of that we currently by RCW, we have to hire vendors who have the qualifications.
How much did you say we spent on contracts?
For just HVAC related issues, it's approximately 55,000 a year.
Would we be able to save that and offset this 122?
Yes, we would be able to save, I feel that, plus some.
So really, we don't need an add of 122,000, we'd need about half that much. And the general fund piece would be
70%.
70%
For some
of
reason you
about
said 70, that's
62.
why I'm curious about that. Why 70, not 60?
Why is it 70%?
Yeah, instead of 60, everything else is kind of 60-40.
So,
Roughly.
So when you look at the rates for M&O, for general fund and the total, it came out to about 70% for the M&O rates.
Is that the new 60-40?
It's not the new 60-40, but as we've talked about, the 60-40 is an average of everything. And we use that for conversation purposes. For this particular thing, the allocation method is on square footage. And we have more square footage in general fund offices and departments than we do restricted
Is this
funds.
building square footage added in?
This building square footage is it added in? I
No.
don't think it
No,
is.
it's not.
No, because
So
this
that's
is
okay.
leased.
It's a
I'm
lease.
trying to figure out the why of that.
Why is it so high
Assertion you
even
just
though
said.
we took us out? That's we would have to look, let us look that up and get
Okay.
back to you.
I believe when we looked at it, it was actually 68%, just under 68% general fund.
Yeah, well,
We'll take a look why it's so high.
I might add, there is a related savings to this as well. When it comes to energy efficiency in buildings, the controls aspect of the buildings make a significant difference in regards to the energy that it uses. And to have a specialist on board who can monitor and keep the controls working the way that they would work is, again, may not be calculated directly into what Jason is saying, but there will be some offsetting cost savings just due to the better energy efficiency operation of the buildings with this position.
So it's the impact to the general fund is right around $45,000.
Haha. That's what I wrote. That's pretty good. We haven't gotten them to talk about the other item.
So central services has 0 general fund. And we did not ask the restricted funds to do the same exercise. Part of the message that was sent out said the board would be extremely selective though in what you did fund. This is the only item that central services has brought forward is this additional facilities person. If we were to need to do reductions in central services, I would be looking at a position that is about to become vacant. And we'd be scrubbing costs, but as you've seen, costs are going up, not down.
Sounds like 20%.
Okay.
And then the last slide that we have up here, quite honestly, it's a recap of the CIP presentation that was presented back in July. So I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to go through this in any detail. These are really just listed to give a broad idea of the projects that are, I'm gonna say, on the books for the next 6 years and what funding source we're planning to be able to execute these through.
So you've reviewed all of these in the CIP, this is just a recap.
So can I ask about, so building reserves? We have some sort of formula,
Based on square footage.
okay? And that's not adequate. I mean, I'm trying to connect that to the plan that you were outlining, like,
Yes.
cause that's kind of trying to do the same thing, but just not as, you wanna dial that in more tightly in terms of prioritization of needed infrastructure upgrades.
Yes, and also help us to project further out into the future for our longer range needs.
So what we're doing now is just like some kind of super, like square footage times X, and it's not, it's just not, it's kind of
It's
vague
not
and
good enough,
ballpark,
yeah.
too ballparky.
It's immediately reacting when something breaks. Or it's like Jason and his team are shifting to preventative maintenance to the extent that they can. But they know that certain things need to, on a preventative cycle, certain things are coming up in the next few years that need to be replaced. An HVAC system, a roof, carpets, whatever it is that we're saving up for. What has not been done for a while is that long-term look, because a roof should outlast 20 years. And very much like Bruce was describing, how much should we be saving up from building 6 so that we can replace the roof in 20 years? And what should they be paying into this fund for that roof? Or the HVAC system, or the, help me guys, you know, yeah, whatever it is we
Fire
need to
alarm
replace.
systems.
By building, we should be doing that analysis. The county used to do that and hasn't done that really long-term view for a while. And even when the county was doing that, they weren't necessarily recovering or setting aside enough money to do all the things. And they weren't being creative about where you might find funding for it. So again, with this long-term plan, we'd have an idea of what these buildings need to continue to be efficient. And we, you know, at some point in time, we're going to need a new courthouse. But how long can we make the buildings we have last? So that's part of what this analysis will tell us. And then it'll position us to be able to see what opportunities are available for grants, like the ESCO grants for energy efficiency. Where can we use those? Or when we were talking about to Strategies 360, maybe there's federal money for courtrooms that we never knew were out there. If we could show that we have a project teed up for that, maybe we could be successful in a grant request. So it'll all play into this.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Are we good? Okay. Our next session is set to start at 3:30. Great job. So we'll go ahead and take a 15-minute break. So Okay, we are back from break. It is 3:30 and we are picking up with information technology.
Hi, I'm Sherry Ill and I'm the Director of IT. Pulling up my. Okay, you're fine. Thank you. All right, so information technology, as you know, manages the county networks, security infrastructure, business applications, and desktop applications. We have 4 different divisions, application, desktop, GIS, the network team, and then we have the project management office and security. IT also provides spatial geographic information to the county, other agencies, and the public. And we provide troubleshooting, phone support, equipment purchases, and equipment surplus support for our 1,350 users. We do this through 3 different lines of service, basically our maintenance and operations, our new technologies and services, and then the strategic planning portion. Oh, there we go. Okay. IT has 4 funds that I don't really manage the first one. The 2021 debt holding, that's the bond. The large system replacement reserve, that's where we collect money to replace the larger applications as they age out. Information technology operations, and we have an IT reserve, which is the money we collect to replace the hardware and desktops. And our beginning balance for 2024. Do I need to walk through all of these, or do you just? No.
You don't need to for my
Okay.
benefit.
Okay. All right. And then our total fund, $17 million for 2022, $22 million for 2023. Our proposed is $21 million for 2024 and $17 million for 2025. Some of them, there's things that are going on that affects these total costs. For example, the personnel in 2023 and 2024, those costs include, there's time related to the ERP project that we're paying out of one of our funds. And then in 2024, there's a drop off there because from transferring the bond funds to a different 5240 fund.
So before you leave that one, much like in central services, one of the things you see in this fund is that personnel costs is not the biggest cost of this fund. It is other expenses, and those expenses are paying for, as Sherry mentioned, large systems, licenses. What are some of the other big costs?
Our network expenses, we have $500,000 in cell phone bills we pay every year. Lots of operational costs.
Right, again, not the cost of this department, but rather the costs of the entire county.
Yeah, so a lot of our maintenance we pay is not stuff that we use, but the offices and departments use it. We collect the monies from the appropriate users, so we pay it out of our fund.
Is that what you're referring to on the bottom? It says in the fund table, do not include general fund?
That was just a note in the presentation that for other funds to not include the general fund here. And you'll see that again, like central services, IT has no direct appropriation out of the general fund.
I'm curious, how much of that budget amount is dedicated to licensing charges? You know, those are ongoing extortion fees, I refer to them as.
I wanna say it is, I have it.
I have the chart you gave me.
Yeah,
I asked
Oh,
her
you
for a
already
chart
asked
of
that
this.
question?
Yeah.
She gave me a chart of all the license. I'll give
Okay.
you a copy.
Thank you.
It's on my desk.
it's quite a bit. Okay.
And we'd have absolutely no control over that, other, I mean, it's another inflationary cost, I'm
It's
sure.
millions every year.
Yeah, it is. It's like 4.5 million or something. I
So
can't
it's a
remember.
substantial
It's a big
amount.
chunk.
It is a big chunk, and some of them, we build in a 5% increase based on what the vendors tell us that we're gonna choose. So we just they automatically increase by 5% every year without anything. We have done some things to try and limit that cost. For example, we're trying to negotiate a time and materials cost for our JABS contract. They wanna charge us $88,000 for maintenance every year, and we don't think we need that. We take care of most of the equipment ourselves, so we're negotiating a time and materials contract with them, so we can cut that back to.
And if we were to depend on them, the response time would be longer and all other kind of problems, right?
Yes, and they don't like to come after hours, which
They
is a
don't-
problem
yeah.
because court is only available for them to do work on that equipment after hours, so we can do it after hours.
I ran into Brian Ferris over the weekend.
Did you?
He spoke highly of you. He's playing music and enjoying life, I might have you know.
All right. Okay. So some of our opportunities and challenges, of course, like a lot of the other offices and departments, retaining talent has become our top operational priority, and it still remains our greatest challenge. We're down to about 3 or 4 vacancies right now, so we're making progress. But keeping them, we'll see how that goes, right? Through innovation, training, staff development, and support, we'll be able to provide our teams with the tools they need to improve the work that they do and optimize our abilities while reducing the cost of IT rework. Some of the most expensive things in IT projects is when things don't go right the first time and you have to go back and redo it to make it right. And so through training and staff development, the types of things that we feel like we can provide to be more efficient. And then, of course, another thing we would like to do, this is an opportunity, is to increase the communication between IT and the offices and departments to help them identify solutions that are sustainable.
Do you have any of those problems with contractors as well? Cause I mean, I take it you have those problems with our own employees, but when contractors come in, they don't get it right, you have to redo it.
Absolutely.
So do we try to bill them back or do anything like that? Is there any possibility of doing that?
It's difficult. It becomes part of, reviewing the contract at that point and determining. We don't necessarily get to bill them back as much as they have to make it right. They have to make it work. They rarely give any money back. Okay, any questions about any of
Yeah,
that?
do we give them black marks on their ratings or something like that? I mean, is there a way to get back at them to encourage them to try and do it right?
Well, a lot of their business comes through referrals. So if they had another county that they wanted to do work with and they wanted to use this as a referral, if they didn't do a good job, we wouldn't give them a reference. And because we belong to the Association of County and City Information Services in the state of Washington, we can provide feedback at those locations as well during conferences or.
I guess I would encourage you not to hold back from being critical if it's costing you.
Yeah,
We don't.
we do not. We're very open, cause we want people to be open with us, so. Okay, and so that takes us to our policy level requests. The first one, we don't have an exact cost on yet. The highest it would be $2,561,000, but we're negotiating that with our vendor right now, and that is to update the ERP contract. plus continue to pay the 3 FTEs that we have.
It's not going to be this much.
It is not. We've made
Don't-
great
have a panic
progress.
attack?
Yeah, don't.
How'd you know that was coming? Did you feel
Yeah.
my heart rate? Did you feel it
Oh, no, I
rusting
just
through the table?
my own heart rate goes up when I see these numbers. I mean, I saw
Okay.
the early proposal and Sherry knew right away that the answer was no.
How does this fit with 60-40? Is it now 70-30 or?
No, that's not, that is not the new split.
Okay.
So approximately what percentage of IT is general fund, would you say?
In this case, it's a little bit harder to calculate. It's typically 40%, but because financial services pays the bulk of, like Munis, for example, it would be a little bit higher in the ERP.
Right, so the financial system is transaction-based is the allocation method. But a lot of it is budget-based. And the county budget is only about 30% general fund or less. Yeah, 30% or less. So, so IT costs a little less in terms of the percentage, but Sherry said the ERP is a little difficult and we're nowhere close to a number. It will not be anywhere close to $2.5
It will
million.
not. Our second priority is to add another FTE for the network division. We've stood up several new buildings over the past decade, and we have not increased the size of the network team at all. So we're asking for one more person to help maintain the network, the connections, the wireless access points. They also manage all of our data connections between the buildings and our firewalls and et cetera. The recommended number of network staff for an organization our size is 7, and we have 4. So we're asking for one more. Our third priority is to remove the end dates for the 2 ERP positions. One of them is in IT, it's our applications support person that has been filling in behind the application staff working on the ERP project. And the other one is a management analyst that works in the budget office.
So just to talk a moment about that, we're asking to remove rather than extend. Because for the position that's within IT, we know that Oracle comes with much higher level maintenance requirements, and then that person wouldn't only work with Oracle, they would work on many systems.
Yes.
And in the person in the commissioner's office, we've talked a little about this, they wouldn't only be maintaining Oracle and the new budget system, but they would also be supporting OpenGov, Balancing Act, the Granicus, which is your new LegStar program to support board meetings, and other systems that are specific to the commissioner's office, but we would have the embedded model where the person would report to IT but work on commissioner systems. So that's why it's not just an extend.
And then the last one is the Axon Justice Premier Digital Evidence Solution, which for prosecuting attorney and public defense, which I promised I would carry through just in case our existing system didn't meet the requirements. We're at about a 95% verification that the existing system meets the requirements. We're just waiting on one more piece of information, and that has to do with retention.
So let me ask, how much has the free camera system cost us?
How much has the free camera system,
What's the free camera system?
body cams?
Body cams.
Oh. I can't even tell you.
I would like to know that number.
So I can figure that out.
Rough, you know,
Um,
just a rough. doesn't have to
It
be-
costs a lot, if you include our time for supporting and maintaining
Oh,
that.
I
And
agree.
then ER&R for putting it in the cars and the amount of, yeah, it's been very expensive.
So I'm wondering if that can't be billed to foundational public health. It's all about foundational public health in the end, so.
That's a very creative idea that I
Make
don't
us a
think
safer-
will.
Strategic plan number 7 or something like that.
I can get you an estimate of what that costs.
Title says strategic plan, that's why I threw it.
Sure. Foundational public health is probably not
Making
the
Thurston
answer.
County a better place to
Better
live, work, and
place.
play, so.
Yes, it certainly
Yes.
does.
Yes, it does.
So obviously it's valid.
So anyway, I think we gotta be innovative.
Yeah, that would be innovative.
No, it is true. It's a true statement.
Okay, that's all I have. Do you have any other questions?
So I wanna say that on the topic of reductions, while none of the IT funds are general fund, Sherry has been thinking about ways to reduce costs.
Yes.
Could you talk about some of those ideas? She talked about one with JAVS.
With JAVS.
Uh-huh.
Another one we're looking into is can we replace our phone system with Teams? Teams has an option for using a desk phone, and so I've got, we tapped Microsoft to provide us a free, it's a free resource
Is
to help
is
us
that
figure
kind
it
of in
out.
comparison to Zoom or Verizon has Zoom or something and Teams has something else or?
Teams is part of our Microsoft Office solution. It comes with it, and you can make phone calls on it, and you can,
Well, how come some people like Teams and some didn't and all that?
That's for the online meetings. Some of us can get one to work better than the other. But Sherry's talking about using it to support the telephone system. So we wouldn't have desk phones anymore, and we would completely eliminate the cost of desk phones, and then some of us would still have
Do we
work
have-
phone,
Do we
cell
have good
phones.
enough service in the building now with these?
we do.
It'd be across the net, the whole Teams
And you can
support.
actually be then working somewhere else, and the call would come into your computer just like you were sitting in your office.
Yeah,
It follows you.
so it's a very interesting idea. How
Is
much?
remote work more feasible?
I mean, how many people in the county actually use desk phones, right?
I rarely answer mine, cause it's all.
Thomasina does, but
I was like, besides if you're like a front, facing,
I talked
right?
on mine
I know, I'm
today.
sure Brandy
First time
and
in 6 months, so.
Jamie, but like, for, I know I don't, I'm on my cell phone all the time,
Or your computer.
or my computer, but usually if it's, if I'm gonna make a call, I'm grabbing cell phone and then calling out from there instead of going in and, so that's not how much in savings would that be?
It depends on what it would cost to, it depends on the licensing costs. We already own Teams, and so that is free as part of our Microsoft Office licensing. But in order to do some of the things on the phone that we do today, like call routing and those types of things, we're looking at what that licensing would be. But we probably spend about $650,000 a year on our desk phones.
Well, then, is that not maybe something that we could do for those who are not using their desk phones? I think there's 3 right here.
And is there a way to connect the computer line to a piece of equipment that would still sit on a desk?
Yes.
And we'd still save that much money, so like the front receptionist would still have a phone.
An actual phone, yeah.
Yeah, to pick up.
So we're researching that right now. There's a couple counties and cities up north. Everett is doing it currently, so we've got some, I think it's Everett, don't hold me to that. That's a rumor at this point, because I'm not positive. But anyway, Microsoft is connecting us with some counties that have already done it to see if it makes sense. In addition, we're retiring all of our Cisco gear and replacing it all with Fortinet. And so we've got a Cisco maintenance contract that we'll be able to end as of the end of this year, plus a NetMail contract for when we switch from NetMail to Exchange Outlook that we had to maintain because of public records retention. So we'll be eliminating that. I mean, those are not very much money, but we also did some work with Verizon to consolidate the cell phone bills and to get those that need to be on unlimited plans onto unlimited plans, which will save us quite a bit in my book, but not millions, but you know, maybe at $10,000 or something. So you start adding them up and maybe I'll get to $1 million. Probably not, but
Yeah.
Well, I mean, oh, ERP.
don't look at that number. It's
Don't
not
look at that
right.
number.
I'm not-
We
I'm
are
not
getting
going to
them
look at the number.
way down and we've got strategies on how to get it to 0.
Yeah, okay. And then of course that, you know, honestly, the removing the end dates for the ERP positions really falls into that whole updating of the ERP contract because it's just ongoing
Right.
maintenance.
So we don't have any choice.
Yeah, it's just like, unless we decide to pull the plug now, but there's no benefit to that, right?
Well, the Eden is our payroll system and it will no longer
No
be
longer
around
exist,
in
right?
2026, so we don't have a choice.
Yeah. We can't just abandon the,
No.
we've got to do something.
Priority 4, maybe I missed that part, but.
So that is the Axon Public Defense and
Mhm.
Prosecuting Attorney. I put this in because I promised them I would carry it forward until we found out for sure the G-Tech solution would work for them.
And then what's the conversations going on with G-Tech right now?
The one last remaining piece is around retention. Apparently Axon lets you set retention based on whose version of the video you have, and G-Tech doesn't. So we're trying to figure out with sheriff, prosecuting attorney, and public defense if there's a way to just find the oldest or the longest retention and just mark them all with the longest retention rate out of the 3 groups. So just one minor, we're at 95% right now.
Okay. Thank you for your work on that. Okay, anything else for Sherry?
You guys are incredibly easy on me. I guess spending all this time with you is paying off.
All right.
3:53, and so I'll pass it to Nicole to kind of wrap us up.
So we met with departments and offices today and we'll pick back up on Wednesday to continue that. We'll have the Commissioner's Office, non-departmental, other funds, and then Regional Housing Council. This will be the schedule for the next 2 weeks.
So the item on the Regional Housing Council is, I think specifically around
Franz Anderson.
Franz Anderson and Quinn Street. Yep. All right.
So 3:54, thank you all for your hard work today and
See you tomorrow at 9.
see you tomorrow at 9:15 for
9:15
agenda
for
setting.
agenda setting.
We're adjourned.